For those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Deckant, council member from the Southeast District, and this year I'm serving as Hutchinson Mayor. It is a good evening, and welcome. Thank you for your presence here this evening, and by that presence, demonstrating your support for Hutchinson. I'm certain that we're all here because we care for our community and want to be part of creating the best for Hutchinson. But that's not usually a task, an easy task, is it? We face challenges. There are naysayers. And those of us who truly care don't always agree on how to go about creating the best for Hutchinson. When we consider how to bolster Hutchinson's core, revitalize our local economy, and set our community up for a sustainable and thriving future, are we asking the right questions on how to do that? As taxpayers, has the growth and development model we've been following for the last 50 years truly worked in our favor? Or is it time to seek some different paths? Well, this evening is not going to have any magic answers, but it is going to be a significant opportunity to hear about and consider different ideas and ways to create the best Hutchinson. Strongtown's founder and president, Charles Marohn, will engage us in frank discussion about where we, as a community, might better focus our energies to achieve a collective vision for our future. He will explain in plain language how so many American cities have found themselves in decline after decades of growth, how we can measure a town's success, and how all citizens can help make Hutchinson stronger. A number of community groups and organizations have come together to bring this message and spark a different set of questions to consider when investing in and developing our community. Included are the City of Hutchinson, the Hutchinson-Reno County Chamber of Commerce, HutchRec, the Hutchinson Community Foundation, and Young Professionals of Reno County. We sincerely hope that every one of you in attendance will intentionally debrief the ideas shared here with friends and family, as well as boards and civic groups to which you belong and churches you attend. The impact of this curbside chat will be what we do with the information after Charles Marohn leaves. Please multiply its value by healthy discussion and, yes, respectful disagreement about these ideas. Then we will be on the road to creating the best for Hutchinson. The presentation this evening will last approximately 70 minutes, followed by 20 minutes or so of question and answers. We are video recording this curbside chat so that it can be shared with others who are not present. We invite you, the audience, to Carl's after the event to begin our important local conversation. There's also a sign-up sheet in the lobby for anyone to provide their email address if you would like to receive follow-up information about conversations stemming from this curbside chat. Well, with that, I am pleased to introduce to you Charles Marohn, known as Chuck to friends and colleagues. Charles is a professional engineer, licensed in the state of Minnesota, and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. He is the founder and president of Strongtown. Charles has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Minnesota's Institute of Technology and a Master of Urban and Regional Planning degree from the University of Minnesota's Humphrey Institute. Marohn is the lead author of Thoughts on Building Strong Towns, Volumes 1, 2, and 3, as well as the author of A World-Class Transportation System. He hosts the Strong Towns podcast and is a primary writer for Strong Towns web content. He has presented Strong Towns concepts in hundreds of cities and towns across North America, and in 2017 was named one of the 10 most influential urbanists of all time. Chuck grew up in a small town in central Minnesota, the oldest of 3 sons of 2 elementary teachers. He joined the Minnesota National Guard on his 17th birthday while a junior in high school and served for 9 years. In addition to being passionate about building a stronger America, he loves playing music, is an obsessive reader, and religiously follows his favorite team, the Minnesota Twins. Chuck and his wife live with their 2 daughters in their hometown of Brainerd, Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming Charles "Chuck" Marohn.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. And very nice. I'm assuming you all are Royals fans, so I appreciate the tolerance. Are you Twins fans? Are you joking me? I'm amongst my tribe. That's wonderful. We have no one. I said this week, I just want a good World Series. I'm not really interested in who wins or loses because the Twins and the Yankees are not in it. So I have no one to cheer for and no one to cheer against. Thank you for taking your evening and coming out here tonight. I got to spend some time today in your city, getting to know it with some people who know it very well. And I want to just start off by saying that I'm very enthusiastic about Hutchinson. I'm very optimistic about you and where you're at and all the kind of assets and great things that you have to build on here. My conversation and the Strong Towns conversation is a hard one, a difficult one at times, but particularly in places like Hutchinson, it's one that gives a lot of hope and a lot of opportunity kind of illuminated when we look at things a little bit differently. I live in Brainerd, Minnesota, which is a couple hours north of Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's right in the middle of the state. When I grew up, I actually lived in the neighboring city of Baxter. Baxter and Brainerd are right next to each other. They share a boundary, and then there's really nothing around them for many, many miles. When I was a kid, Baxter was 1,000 people. And Brainerd was the old, dying railroad town. It was the place that had the old paper mill that was closing, the old railroad yard that had closed. It was a place with the old gridded streets with the houses that the poor people lived in, and it was kind of falling apart. Every year when we would go school clothes shopping, we would drive an hour south to the big city of St. Cloud, where they had a mall that wasn't run down like our mall. They had stores that we could buy nice tennis shoes and things like that. When I joined the Army in 1990, I spent the summer between my junior and senior year at basic training, and when I came back, there was a Walmart and a Target that had not been there when I left. And from that point on, my city really started to change. Baxter, the neighboring city, went from 1,000 people to now today it's 9,000. It has all the big box stores, all the franchise restaurants, all the new subdivisions with the big fancy homes. All that stuff is in Baxter. And for much of my life, in my early professional life as an engineer, certainly, I was very, very confident that the people in Baxter that were experiencing all the growth and all the success and all the prosperity and all the outward signs that things were going well, those people were smarter. Those people were kind of, in a way, better people. They understood things. They were obviously had done a better job. Just look at what they created. It was so much superior to what was going on in the neighboring city. And in fact, there was a certain sense of superiority when we look over at the neighboring city, saying, look at all the opportunities that never came to them. Look at all the things that they were never able to do. Look at how their place is falling apart and failing to thrive in many ways. Those people are lesser people. Today I live in Brainerd. And I live in Brainerd for a very conscious reason. It's a better place. A better place in many ways. I'm going to show you tonight some of those ways and some of those reasons. But I live there because it's a wonderful community. I live a block and a half from what I think is the best park in central Minnesota. I'm excited when I got up this morning. It was 30 degrees at home when I left home to drive to the airport to fly here. 30 degrees might not mean much to you, but to me, it means that in about 2 or 3 weeks, there's going to be an ice skating rink a block and a half from my house. And my kids and I will get to go ice skating. It's one of our favorite things to do. I'm about 6 blocks from our downtown. It was a downtown that when I was a kid was in the last stages of kind of falling apart. And when my parents were kids, there were all kinds of things in our downtown. It was just this crazy hub of activity. Throughout my life, it's just been a constant kind of decline. Over the last 4 or 5 years, it started to see a renaissance. Now I can walk 6 blocks and I've got my choice between 4 really nice restaurants. A new bookstore has come in, a new clothier came in downtown, there's stuff starting to happen. Small incrementals, like the first little green shoots. It is an exciting place to be. When I come here, I get this real sense, it's kind of in your face, that there's 2 different kind of visions for the future competing with each other. One is a vision that says, here's what is new. Here's what other places have. Here's how we measure our worth. If we can get, and I'm empathizing with this because when we got a Kohl's and an Olive Garden, I'm not joking you, my niece said, now we have everything. She's a sweet girl, I love her, she needs to get out more. I get that vision because I grew up in that vision, I lived in that vision. There's another vision though. It's the vision that I'm starting to see emerge in my town, and I see it here in Hutchinson too. It's a vision that says, how do we make this the best version of itself that it can be? How do we make Brainerd the best version of Brainerd it can be? How do we make Hutchinson the best version of Hutchinson it can be? The mayor said this when he was up here just a minute ago. It's a different vision. And let me crystallize for you what this means in my community. Because there's a number of indicators, but I'm going to give you one indicator. It's not the totality. This is not how I would measure success in its totality, but I think it's one quick way to say, is this working? When someone new comes to my community and they work at the hospital or are an administrator at the county or are taking a higher level executive job and they're making really good money that is way beyond what the median income of my relatively poor city is. My town leads the state in unemployment almost always. And by lead, I don't mean lead as in good, I mean lead as in we have the worst unemployment. We're a city that really, really struggles. With that person moving to town, that new executive that kind of has quadrupled the family income of the median family in our town, would that person ever choose to live in our city? Or would they go live on a lake way out there, or go live in a subdivision in a neighboring city, or some new house somewhere else? And we're actually getting to the point now where I think that there's actually a choice to be made now. There's actually a choice to be made. We're actually becoming a better version of who we are, to the point where not only are we improving the quality of life for people who live there today, but we actually have people when they come to town say, that's the kind of neighborhood I would like to live in. Back in the early 2000s, I ran my own planning company. I was doing planning work for cities all around the state. And I was kind of on the front lines of the growth machine. Writing permits, doing plans, putting ordinances together, helping cities with developments as they would come in. We were kind of the experts that you would call if you were a small town and did maybe one development every 2 or 3 years. You didn't have staff to handle that. You called in the experts. We would come in and help people with this. And before you could default on a home mortgage in the mortgage crisis, you had to build a home. Before you could build a home, you had to get the permit. Before you get the permit, you had to have the development. Before you get the development, you had to come and talk to us. And so by the time we got to 2008, I had seen, and I didn't see the subprime, like I didn't get that part of the housing crisis, but I saw how this was going to destroy many, many cities' budgets. We were out writing memos and reports to the cities that we worked with saying, this is going to be really, really bad. And none of them wanted to hear it. None of them wanted to And when we hit 2008, I had to lay off a whole bunch of people that worked with me because our work was way, way, way down. Like I said, we were on the very front edge of this. And I had been writing these memos to these cities saying, like, look, you have a 100 years supply of development lots. We should never do a new development. And they're like, Chuck, just shut up and do the development. That's what we pay you for. By the time we got to 2008 and we had banks failing and gas at $4 a gallon and Wall Street bailouts and what seemed at the time to be a crazy election season. It looks kind of quaint now looking back. At the time it seemed insane, right? I was so frustrated I didn't know what to do because no one was saying and speaking about the things that I saw going on. And no one wanted to hear about them or talk about them. And so in my frustration, I sat down and I started to write. Much like people who exercise say it takes routine exercise to establish a pattern, I knew that for writing I needed to establish a pattern, so I wrote 3 days a week. I published it on the site. People started to read it, started to pass it around. Some friends of mine encouraged me to start a nonprofit. I told them no. They said, you just keep writing, we're going to fill out the paperwork. A year later, we had a 501c3, and a few months after that, a foundation a couple hours north of where I live called and said, we've been reading your stuff. We're really interested in strong towns. We're a foundation. Could you come up and tell us about your programs? I said, we don't have any programs. We don't do anything. I just me writing. They said, well, come up and meet with us. And after sitting down with them and going through an early version of the presentation we're going to do tonight, they gave me 3 years of startup money to leave my planning practice and to go out and share this message with as many people as I can. And so since 2012, I've been traveling around Minnesota, around the Midwest, around the United States, around the continent, and now to some degree around the world, sharing this message with audiences. And it all started with trying to answer this one basic question: why is my city going broke? Why, despite all the money we spend on job creation and economic development and new business development and infrastructure and growth, why do we never have any money? Why can't we keep the library open past 4:30? Why can't we keep the streetlights on overnight? Why can't we fix the crosswalk? Why can we find $9 million to build a shortcut around the south side of town, but we can't find the money to fix a broken sidewalk? Why? And so tonight we're going to answer that question, why. And then we're going to talk about how we start to do things differently so that we can make our cities strong and economically healthy again. Just real briefly, our mission as a movement is to support a model of development that allows our cities, towns, and neighborhoods to become financially strong and resilient. We don't write 3 days a week now. We post 3 articles a day. We've got a bunch of podcasts that we do. We're doing everything we can to share this message with as many places as we can. At the end tonight, I'll have some stuff for you so you can get signed up, or you can go follow us, and I'll give you those addresses. But before we do that, I want you to think about the way cities were built thousands of years ago. These are 2 artist renderings. The one on the left is an ancient city called Fertile Crescent, 4000 BC. The one on the right, of course, is ancient Rome. If we look at these cities, we understand that they were built around the dominant transportation technology of the day, that, of course, being your 2 feet. People would walk everywhere, so the spacing, the scale, the distances between different types of things you would do on a normal day, all this was based around a society of people who walked. Fast forward thousands of years, this is my hometown in the early 1900s. People would arrive by train, they would arrive by stagecoach, but once they got here, they would walk everywhere they went. And so the spacing, the scale, the distances between different types of things you would do on a normal day, all this was based around a society of people who walked. Beginning in the early 1900s and then accelerating after World War II, we of course began to build cities around a different transportation technology. We began to build cities around the automobile. We came up with different building types, different building styles, different ways of arranging things on the landscape. If we were to go out tonight and poll people on the street to explain and ask them to explain this transition, they would more than likely talk about it in terms of progress. We used to be people who walked everywhere, so we built cities around people who walked. Now we are people who drive everywhere, and we build cities around people who drive. Someday we will have jet cars, and we'll build cities around people in jet cars. And someday we will have teleportation technology, and our cities will look completely different than they do now. This is a narrative of progress. And it's very comforting for us to think of it in this way, because it puts us on this path, this continuum of things always getting better. There's another way to think about this, however, that isn't quite as affirming. And I want to put this idea in the back of your head as kind of a little seed that will germinate, hopefully, throughout this conversation tonight. When we look at these ancient cities, what we have to recognize is that even by the time you get to ancient Ur, humans have been experimenting with how to build cities for thousands and thousands of years. They would try things, what worked, they would expand upon, what didn't work. Oftentimes those places, those people died, right? Those ideas died with them. Those ideas were not transmitted on to the next generation. And so over thousands and thousands of years of incrementally trying things to see what worked, we started to build cities in a certain way. By the time you get to ancient Rome, you've got a pattern of development that had been tested and refined over thousands and thousands of years. Times that were good, times that were bad, times of rapid growth, times of decline and stagnation, times of plenty, times of want. And by the time you get to my hometown, in the early 1900s, we have a development pattern that is essentially universal. You can go to cities around the world, different continents, different cultures, different latitudes. And while the architectural styles will be different and the building materials will be different based on the local culture, the essential character of the place, the layout, the design, the spacing, is universal. When we look at this approach to development, even though this is what most of us have ever known, right? As a young engineer, when I would ask questions, I was always told, well, this is the way we've always done it, Chuck. What we understand is that this is a very young experiment, right? We didn't try this out in Nebraska for a couple hundred years, see how it worked there, take the best ideas and bring them here, right? We just did this everywhere, all at once, reshaping an entire continent within the blink of an eye. Changing how we did everything. Not only how we got around, but how we built our places, how we financed them, how we interact with each other, how we fall in love, how we do business deals. All of this was changed in an incredibly short period of time. It is important for us to understand how huge of an experiment this is. No civilization in all of human history has reshaped everything about how they live across an entire continent in just a mere generation. We're going to look tonight at some of the financial implications of this change, things that, while some people might have been thoughtful about this, most people were not aware of when they started on this huge experiment. One of the early things that we did at Strong Towns was to look at our development pattern and ask some questions so we could infer some larger trends. We would hunt for developments that did not have a lot of kind of background noise, like this one. This is a dead-end cul-de-sac. There's no through traffic here, no commercial traffic here. It's the most simple kind of development you can find. It's just a dead-end road serving some homes. When this was built, the city paid half the cost of building the road, and the property owners paid the other half. We looked at the taxes the city collects from the property owners that live on this road, the only people who really use it in any meaningful way. And we said, how long is it going to take the city to recoup the amount of money that they spent to build that road? The answer is 37 years. Now, the road's going to last longer than 37 years. Where's the money going to come to fix it? Not from these property owners here. Here's another development. This one is a closed loop with a dead-end cul-de-sac. Again, no through traffic, no commercial traffic, just a simple residential development. When this one was built, the developer paid for all the costs of the infrastructure. The developer put in the roads and the streets and the pipes and everything that was needed. Of course, those costs were rolled over into the sale price of the home. People have been counting that as part of their property value. They've been paying that on their mortgage since they purchased it. At the same time, they've been paying taxes to the city to ostensibly maintain the road, but it fell apart. The road did fall apart. The city went out and fixed it. The cost was $354,000. We asked the question, based on the taxes that the city recoups from the people that live within this development, how long is it going to take them to recoup the amount of money they spent to fix the road? The answer is 79 years. Now, the roads are going to last anywhere near that long. So we said, okay, if the city wanted to try to recoup enough money from these property owners between now and the time the road fell apart, what would that mean? It would mean a 46% increase in taxes immediately, with annual increases of 3% over inflation every year for the next 25 years, with all that money going just to maintain the roadway. The sewer, the water, the storm sewer, all that, vastly more expensive. Now, sometimes people say, okay, Chuck, we get it. We know we lose money on commercial, or on residential, excuse me. We make it up on commercial. Commercials are cash cow. Now, I know there's a little bit of that vibe here because of your reliance on the sales tax. It's an interesting proposition. I don't know any corporation that loses money on 90% of what it does and tries to make it up on the last 10%. I don't know why an incorporated municipality would think that would be a successful business strategy. Nonetheless, when we look at commercial development, we see much the same thing. This is a business park. This is one of those build it and they will come kind of investments. It's got the wide industrial streets, the deep pipe. This was built in order to attract development. This is completely built out today. Every single lot is occupied. The city felt this was such a successful project, they wanted to build the exact same thing on property they own next door. They just want to take this development and they want to build the same thing right over here. We said, okay, if we could build the same thing for the same price and get the same amount of investment, would this be a good project? If you inflation adjust the dollars, in today's dollars it would cost $2.1 million. Today there is $6.6 million of tax base. Now, pause here for a second. Of the tax base in this park, 4 of the lots belong to a church. 2 of the lots belong to the school district. It's their bus maintenance building. 1 of the lots is a county maintenance garage. 1 of the lots is a city maintenance garage. Of the remaining properties, the ones that theoretically would pay taxes to the city, every single one of them is given a long-term tax subsidy in order to attract them to move into this park. For the sake of our analysis, it was the only way we could make the numbers work. We had to do some crazy assumptions. We had to assume that every single lot was built out within 12 months of this new park opening by a full tax-paying, non-subsidized entity, and that every penny of revenue coming into the city would go to retiring that debt. If that were the case, it would still take the city almost 3 decades, 29 years to break even. That's 29 years where everybody else's taxes would need to go up to pay, to plow the roads, mow the ditches, provide police protection, fire protection, and all the services that are needed. And that's in the most wildly optimistic scenario. When I first went and met with that foundation, I went through about, 18, 20 of these. I was really proud of them. We had a bunch of these. I recognized pretty early that there's a certain level of diminishing returns. People start to cry at a certain point. If you are someone who likes case studies, there's a bunch of them on our website you can go through and look at the numbers. Let me show you what's going on. Because it's actually pretty simple and easy to understand once you grasp what's there. And again, we see this over and over and over and over. Let's say that a developer comes to our community. So I have a piece of land here I would like to build upon. I will, at my expense, put in all the commercial buildings. I'll put in all the residential homes. I'll follow all of your rules and regulations. I'm not asking for any variances from the rules at all. I'll follow them all. I will, at my expense, put in all the required roads and streets and curbs and sidewalks. We'll have a big pot of money there to do it. This is what that looks like from a cash flow standpoint. In year 1, everything is brand new. Hasn't cost you anything. The money comes in, you take that portion, and you set it aside. In year 2, more money comes in, you add to what you had in year 1. In year 3, you add a little bit more, and on and on and on. And you can see a 5-year-old road isn't costing you anything. A 10-year-old sidewalk isn't costing you anything. A 15-year-old pipe isn't costing you anything. And so year after year after year, money comes in, and it just continues to build up. You get a couple decades out, you're feeling very, very rich. You've got a lot of money. The problem happens when you get to, in this example, year 25. You have to make good on that promise you made a generation ago. What you find is that the cumulative amount of money you brought in is insufficient. And from a cash flow standpoint, you run far into the negative. Now, cities aren't one development, right? Cities are a series of developments, a collection of neighborhoods. So let's say that a developer comes back in a couple of years after that first development and says, you know, that worked really well for me, worked really well for you. I would like to do a similar size development. And every other year from this point forward, a developer comes in with a proposal to do a similar size development. In other words, the ideal scenario, nice, steady, continuous growth. And we take that money and we set it aside and we save it for the day we have to make good on all these promises we're making as we grow. Here's what that looks like. In year one, your first development comes online. It pays in the entire 25 years shown here. Year 3, you've got another. Year 5, year 7, and on and on. And you can see, not only do you have all this money coming in, your cash actually starts to accelerate upwards. So you've got no expenses. Everything's brand new. You're feeling very, very rich. And when you get to year 25, the year you have to make good on that very first promise, yeah, you got to spend a little bit of money, but it's not a big deal, right? You've had all this growth. The growth creates what we call the illusion of wealth. Because as we intuitively understand, if you lose money on every transaction, you don't make it up in volume. If you lose money over the long term on every project you do, the further you go on time, the more downward pressure there is on your budget. This is the answer to that question, why are cities struggling financially? Why, despite all the stuff we do to create growth, are we falling further and further behind? It's because we live with decades and decades of accumulated liabilities. Promises that were made a long time ago that are now all coming due. Everybody in this room knows the person who drives the big fancy truck they can't afford, right? We all know this person, right? Maybe we're related to them. Do we look at them and say, wow, what a wealthy, successful person? No. We tend to look at them and go, that's kind of sad. That's kind of sad. When I drive around on the outskirts of a city, and I look at the big box store, the franchise restaurants, it's the equivalent of the guy who can't afford the huge truck, who got the huge truck. And, 6 years from now, when he's still got 3 years of payments left, and it's not running and it's not working, we all know what's going to happen, right? Let me ask a couple questions here. What happened? I'll ask this one first. Do you recognize yourself in this chart here? I realize not everybody speaks in charts. I'm an engineer, so I think my license requires me to put charts in presentations. I'm very comfortable speaking in charts, but the basic concept here, do you recognize yourself, your own behavior? This is a human trait. This is why people smoke, right? This is why you will go home and sit in front of the TV and watch a ball game instead of going to the gym or going for a walk, right? Oh, this is comfortable. I like this ice cream. This is a good game. Uh-oh, heart disease, right? This is how we're all wired. This is a human flaw. This is a human flaw that we all share. Me, you, all of us share this flaw. Psychologists have studied this extensively. It's called cognitive discounting or temporal discounting. It's the propensity of humans to highly value positive feedback today and to deeply discount mentally negative impacts in the future. This is a human characteristic. What happened to the civilization thousands of years ago that based their development pattern and their economic system around the exploitation of this human flaw? What happened to them? They ceased to exist. They went away. They failed. Their ideas were not transmitted to the next generation. I want to point out one other thing here, and I'm going to run the risk of aggravating some people, so I'm going to preface this with like a trigger warning of some sorts. I realize we're like 2 weeks or 3 weeks from an election. We're close. Partisanship is up high. We're all kind of on edge. If you know, looking at yourself, that you are one of those like reflexively partisan people, you walk outside in the morning and the sun is up, and you're like, the sun is up because Trump is president. Or you walk outside like, the sun is up because despite that damn Trump is president. Like everything is partisan. If you know that that's you, I want you to, for 60 seconds here, just dial it down to 1. Just repress that urge. Because I want you to hear what I'm going to say without that lens, okay? Because I'm going to say something that I don't want you to hear through a partisan lens. 2 years ago, we were in the middle of what really was like one of the craziest election cycles. It's the craziest one I've ever been through. And it was really frustrating me at the time because as I looked at our candidates, what I heard as a strong towns advocate, what I saw and heard for president were two 70-year-olds looking back at the greatest part of their lives, explaining to us how they could recreate that today. Whether the vision was Aussie inherent families and blue-collar jobs, or whether the vision was an expansive government that can do great society kind of programs. Whatever that vision was, where in this timeline was that experience? It was the same exact period of time, a couple decades after World War II. Peak illusion of wealth. We do not live there anymore. We live way, way, way up here. And understanding that is critically important for us, because what we need to do right now is abandon a bunch of bad habits and develop and go back to actually some really good things and some really good habits that were handed down to us by our ancestors. Obviously, there's a lot of implications to what I've said up to this point. The first one is the more we grow in this pattern, the poorer we become. A lot of our narrative about ourselves and our economy and who we are and what we are is predicated around growth. We gotta grow, 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 grow. And growth is important because growth solves a lot of problems. If you look at human history, the biggest problem of human history was how do you divide one loaf of bread between 3 hungry people? That was throughout all of human history like the problem in one variation or another. And after World War II, for this brief moment in time, it felt like we solved that problem. And how did we solve it in the United States? We created 2 more loaves. That's how we solved it. If we continue on this path, if we continue with this approach, we're going the opposite direction. We are becoming poorer every time we do this. And so a big strategy for us is just going to be stop doing things that make us poorer. At the local level, we're being forced to absorb the cost of our development pattern. If we want that road fixed, we have to pay for it. If we want that pipe repaired, that money has to come from us. This can't be done in the current pattern of development without some incredibly large tax increases and some devastatingly large cuts in services. Now, I know this is a conversation we're having at every level of government everywhere, right? How big is the tax increase going to be? How big is the service cut going to be? And by the way, when I say service cut, I don't mean like let's trim the police force by 5% and let's cut back this maintenance budget by 2%. I mean, this road goes bad and we're never going to fix it. This pump went out, and now all these people are not going to have sewer. It is important for us, it's critically important for us to see the third variable in this sentence. The third variable being the current pattern of development. If we look at Hutchinson, and I'm going to give you the 30-second history of this city. Post-World War II. In 1945, here was the size of Hutchinson. You were, what, 41,000 people. Now, this is the size of Hutchinson. You're 41,000 people. Every one of you has to pay for and maintain miles and miles of road, miles of street, miles of pipe, miles of sidewalk, miles of infrastructure. You have to spend your dollars not only on automobiles and insurance and gas, but your time driving back and forth and all over the place for things that the same number of people used to do in this space here. Now, maybe you could have done it in this space and improved your quality of life a little bit. This is crazy. This is crazy. We gotta have a conversation about that. That doesn't work. And doing more of this is actually making the fundamental problem even worse. So what do we do? I'm gonna skip this because I had to put a slide in for Californians because Californians don't understand the meaning of sacrifice. Seriously. We're going to talk the rest of this time here about how we do things differently. In California, we get to the end of this presentation, the Californians would stand up and they'd be mad. Chuck, you really ticked us off. You've come here and scared us. Chicken Little, the sky's falling. You didn't tell us what to do. And I'm like, we just spent the last half hour talking about what you should do. No, what they meant is, what can someone else change about what they're doing so that I don't have to change anything about what I'm doing? That's what a solution is in California. We don't look at it that way. We understand that, life is tough and we can deal with it, right? I want you to look at this image here again. This is my hometown back in the early 1900s. When I first saw this photo, I was blown away. I could not believe that this was my city. It had the name of it right up here. And I said, there's no way. And I actually hunted and found where this site is. I couldn't believe. This is basically like the main street of the city. The railroad was right behind these buildings here. This is the main street of the middle of town. As a planner, I look at the way these buildings line up, the way they frame the public realm at just the right ratios. There's great definition of space. There's great segmentation in the public realm. The buildings themselves front the street in a beautiful way. They've got great symmetry. This is an exquisitely designed street. We would kill to have this today. Let me ask you some questions about these people as a way to help us kind of divest of a bunch of relics that we have created. How thick was their zoning code? How many boards and committees did they have to go to get an approval to build something? How many grants did they get? How much tax subsidy did they give out? How many miles of build-and-they-will-come infrastructure did they put in? How many engineers and planners and economic development advisors do they have on staff giving them advice on what to do? These were a bunch of illiterate lumberjacks in the middle of nowhere. Look at what they built. Look at what they built. These people didn't even have 30-year mortgages. How did they do this? It's really simple. They took the materials they had on hand and they copied a pattern that they had seen work for thousands of years. Literally took what they had and they built in a form that they had seen work in cities around the world for thousands and thousands of years. They copied what they knew worked. After all the grants and subsidies, all the economic development initiatives, all the advice on how to create growth and jobs and prosperity, look what this exact same street looks like now. It's a wasteland of half-occupied buildings and parking lots. If you want a snapshot, understanding of why our cities struggle today, why your your city struggles, why my city struggles. There's $500,000 of public infrastructure in that little stretch of street right there. Where's the wealth that's going to sustain that generation after generation after generation? I was in a university giving a lecture in Boise, Idaho, and I showed this picture, and a student stood up and said, Chuck, I'm from Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a very poor country. We can't afford to build the way that you build here in the United States. When we build, we have to build one block at a time. And we have to make sure before we build the second block that every gap on the first block that we build is filled in. Otherwise, we won't be able to afford it. We're a very poor country. We can't afford to build this way. We're a very poor country now, too. We can't afford to build this way either. And for a long period of time, that illusion of wealth made us think that this kind of thing didn't matter. That we just run pipe all over the place. We could let neighborhoods go bad. We could let things fall apart. It didn't matter. And if it mattered, it mattered to our pride more than it mattered to our pocketbook, right? I know you recently had Target leave. Minnesota's the home of Target, right? My wife would cry if Target left, even though she's probably been at Target, 4 times this year. It's a source of pride, right? We're not worthy of a Target. And I get that. I understand that. I understand the human reaction to that. Yet I'm going to show you in a minute that you're actually better off financially without Target. In dollars and cents. In real dollars and cents. So let's look at this. Oh, I shut this off so I can go. Build it and they will come is a fantastic movie plot. It is a horrible economic development strategy.
Oh, God.
We are in, right now, as a nation, what we at Strong Towns call the desperation phase of the suburban experiment. We are so desperate for growth that we will do anything. We will do things that even a decade ago, let alone a century ago, people would have thought were crazy. We've got millions of dollars in shovel-ready sites. We've got teams of people waiting to hand out subsidies. We've convinced ourselves that we can just pay some big manufacturer to move to town and somehow that will solve all our problems. This is crazy talk. This is not how cities build wealth. This is not how cities have ever built wealth. I'm going to show you right now the very simple way that cities build wealth. Do any of you recognize this street here? Take a close look.
Downtown Reno.
Could this be Hutchinson? It's the wrong trees, right? Could be Wichita, right? Could be Kansas City. Your city at one point looked like that, right? Started just like that. A bunch of pop-up shacks, some hopes and some dreams. Let's go further north. It could be Des Moines, Omaha, Minneapolis, Winnipeg, Fargo, Duluth. Would have had a lake, maybe, if it was Duluth. Could be Chicago, could be Philadelphia, though there wasn't a camera when Philadelphia was in that stage. New York, it could be Manhattan. Manhattan started just like this, right? You go to Manhattan today, and you're in, these massive, massive skyscrapers. At one point in history, Manhattan was just a series of pop-up shacks. Every city in human history, prior to our new kind of experimental way to build, started just like this. London, Paris, Rome. This could be Romulus and Remus standing out there. They all started just like this. Some pop-up shacks, some hopes, and some dreams. If you look at North America, we built thousands of places just like this. And for a variety of complex reasons that defy our ability to predict or project, or even to fully understand after the fact, a lot of these places failed. What happens when a place like this fails? Does unemployment skyrocket? Do we have, the stock market crash? Do we have could have an emergency bailout on Wall Street? No. A few people lose a little bit of money, they salvage what they can, they move along to the next place. These are little bets. We built thousands of places like this across this continent, and for a variety of complex reasons, reasons that defy our ability to predict or project or even to fully understand after the fact, a lot of these places were successful. And when they were successful, they would grow in a very simple to understand way. They would grow incrementally up, incrementally out, and become incrementally more intense. And so after 30 years of incremental growth, this street, which is my hometown, in 1870, would become that street I showed you earlier. After another 40 years of incrementally growing up, incrementally growing out, and incrementally becoming more intense, these 2- and 3-story wood structures would be converted into buildings of brick and granite. We don't build wealth by going to the casino and putting it all on red. The way we build wealth is by making modest investments over a broad area, over a long period of time. Let me show you how powerful this approach to building a place is. These are 2 identical blocks in my hometown. The one on the left I've labeled old and blighted. The one on the right I've labeled shiny and new. If you look at them, you'll see they're the same size area, the same amount of public infrastructure, they're the same thoroughfare, the same neighborhood. Everything about them is the same except for the style of development. That old and blighted block looks like this. In the 1920s, as my city was growing incrementally, the next increment of out were these 3 blocks. So what you're looking at here is the pop-up shack equivalent in the 1920s. And had my community continued to grow over the decades, the people who built this would have expected that they would have seen 2nd and 3rd stories, buildings that would have become more intense, more ornate. Of course, that's not what happened. These were built, then we had the Depression, we had World War II, then the development pattern just skipped right over this and started building out on the edge. These places have stagnated for 90 years. 2 blocks over used to look just like this. The city labeled it blight, had it torn down, and now we have the new Taco John's drive-thru. Everybody was thrilled about this, right? We got rid of blight. What we built now meets all the zoning code, building code provisions. It meets the sign ordinance, the parking ordinance, the setbacks. We got rid of the on-street parking, so now the traffic flows more smoothly through here. The environmental advocates were happy because they got them to put some native plants in the stormwater area back here. The bike advocates, pedestrian advocates were happy because they got them to put a sidewalk in. The sidewalk ends right there, but they got that stretch. Here's what nobody bothered to look at. That old, blighted, run-down block, when this was built, had a total value of $1.1 million. The shiny and new one, the same size area, the same amount of public infrastructure, just a different approach to building. It's only worth $800,000. Understand what you're looking at. You're looking at the traditional pattern of development, that incremental way we built cities around the world for thousands and thousands of years. You're looking at it in its infant phase, after 90 years of neglect, and it still outperforms by a wide margin the stuff we build brand new today. And we all understand what's going to happen to that taco place, right? I saw your old Taco John's today. I saw it. You know what it is? It's nothing now today. It's an empty building. 20 years from now, this Taco John's, if it makes it to that point, will be a used car lot. There'll be a new Taco John's or something up the road. 5 years later, we'll be boarded up. We'll be trying to get grant money to get it torn down or tax subsidy. We've all seen this, right? We've seen this over and over. No one in this room is really that old. Not old enough to see whole developments die. We've seen it. We know what's going to happen. In fact, in the few years since this was done, here's what's happened to the property values. In Minnesota, we collect property tax. Sales tax is collected by the state. We can't get good site data for it. And we don't collect, we don't get it. The state gets it. We don't have local sales tax like you do. Because I know sales tax is an issue, I want to let you know. We did a study here of jobs, and we also did our best to approximate and understand understand the sales tax. From a revenue standpoint, the disparity in sales tax is about the same. So again, like 78% more here than here. But the big important thing is that this stretch here employed double the number of people. And not only did they employ them, they also included eight business owners. This one had some managers, but no business owners that were local. That's the kind of thing we do in the middle of our cities. This is the kind of stuff we do out on the edge. This is our biggest big box store. It's a double-sized big box auto dealership gas station. This is a 20-acre piece of property out on the edge. One of the most valuable pieces of property in the entire area. When these people show up for a meeting, we just stop the meeting and ask them what they need, right? Here's 20 acres of our core downtown. I will tell you, parts of your core downtown are really nice and are trending in the right direction. And you can see where there's some energy and some vitality there. If you can just like unleash it, you kind of get out of the way and let it go. My downtown is starting to have a little bit of that, although for years and years and years we've struggled. If you've seen the movie Fargo, you've seen a not very flattering, but probably not that inaccurate portrayal of my hometown. Most of the second and third stories in the downtown are unoccupied. The first stories we struggled to fill. In my lifetime, there's been nothing new built in the downtown. A lot of buildings that have been torn down and burned down that are now parking lots. When we look at that best of the best out on the edge, we see a total value of $600,000 an acre, a huge sum of money in one property. There's a reason why these guys get so much attention. But when we look to that core of the city, 20 acres, just a different way of developing it. What we see is that it's got a value that's 78% greater. How much do we pay to get that development on the edge? We spent a couple $100 million on the bypass. We spent millions more on frontage roads and backage roads. We spent $10 million just to get the sewer up to this spot here where we can spend millions more running it up and down. How much did my generation spend to get this wealth in the core of the community? That was wealth that my great-great-grandparents and their contemporaries built slowly and incrementally over time and then bequeathed to us as an endowment of sorts, something that would pay off generation after generation after generation. What happens when this big box store goes out of business? Someday it will happen. Maybe it'll be 5 months from now. Maybe it's 5 years from now. Maybe it's 50 years from now. But at some point it will be gone. What comes next? I don't know. But we can drive around your community and see that example after example after example, whatever comes next is going to be lower on the economic food chain than what is here now. The one thing we confidently know is that this right here is the peak. The peak. Everything that's going to come subsequent is going to be lower in value. There's 134 different properties in this core downtown right here. What happens when one of them loses a tenant? Or someone goes out of business, outgrows their building? What happens when, in our infinite wisdom, we figure out that, you know what, we misjudged, we have too much retail space and not enough office space. The market's asking for something different. Or we've got too much office and not enough residential. Well, these buildings are really adaptable. They're highly flexible. They can do many, many different things. They can switch from retail to office to residential. Like that. They've done it for decades. There's a reason why our ancestors, and I say that in the broadest possible sense of the term, our ancestors around the world for thousands of years built in this style. Where's the most financially productive parts of the city? Where do we get the most value per acre? This is Buffalo, New York. You think you're poor and destitute. Buffalo has lost population every year since 1940. After the World War II, they've lost population every single year. It's been a steady downward drip. If you move to Buffalo today, they will sell you a house for $1 if you agree to live there for 5 years and fix it up. That's poor. But I love Buffalo. It's a great place. There's a lot of stuff going on. But they're struggling. They struggle. Disinvestment, decline. Yet when we step back and we say, is the wealth in Buffalo? Can you point to the traditional downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods? That part that was built slowly and incrementally over time. Can you point to it? Any idea where it might be? And not only does it remain this repository of wealth, but it absolutely dwarfs everything that we have built subsequent. We see this in cities of all sizes. Here's a mid-sized city, same kind of pattern. Here's a little small town near where I live. When I first went to Crosby, Minnesota, they told me, Chuck, we've got some really great stuff happening out here. We've got some really great stuff happening out here. These neighborhoods are really rough. We got to figure out how to get this stuff torn down and build with something higher quality. Then we showed them where all their wealth is. In all those poor neighborhoods. In the neighborhoods where all the poor people live. I'm going to go to this because I want you to look at these buildings, and it will give us a sense of what is possible if we just can change the way we look at value and prosperity and wealth in our communities. These are from North Carolina. They could be from here. They could be from anywhere. We've done this all over the country, and we see the same general pattern. Here's a Kmart at $384,000 an acre, a Walmart at $967,000 an acre. So huge developments, large investments. Yet, when we go to the core downtown, here's an old warehouse that is now a supper club, $5 million an acre. And my favorite all time, Jimmy's Pizza, $3.4 million an acre. If we start to recognize that the challenge we face is not one of growth, but one of productive growth. Investments that build our wealth, make us more prosperous, make us stronger, more stable over time. There's one thing that we can do to start to really grasp the extent of the challenge we face. And I'm going to ask you all to do this sometime in the next couple of weeks. I want you to get out of your car and walk. I want you to stop experiencing, at least once, stop experiencing the community at 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, and start experiencing it at 2 miles an hour. Because once you do that, once you go any distance in this community at 2 miles an hour, what you will be overwhelmed with, is how many gaps you have. How big those gaps are, how overwhelming they are. And I want you to do this as a strong towns advocate and as someone with some knowledge about the place. Today we were going down a street that was 5 lanes, 6 lanes, I can't remember how many bizarrely crazy lanes it was. Way more than you'll ever need, that's for sure. And I was telling everybody, like, if you look at this, you're building the street at like $5,000 a foot. Go to your small little residential street and walk down it, or go to some of your, go walk a couple miles just from one side of town to the other. Just take a little bit of it and walk through it. And when you do, I want you to do this. I want you to walk, and I want you to go $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, and understand that that's an underestimate in almost every place you walk. It's an underestimate of the investment that you as a community have made in that street. You've made that. That's what you've chosen to do with your wealth. You've put it there. And because you've done that, you also now have an obligation, a promise you've made, that when it falls apart, you're going to go back and fix it. So go do that. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. And you're going to be overwhelmed with, because when I look at the size, and you see nothing there, nothing that you're getting for that investment, you can start to grasp very, very quickly what the problem is. This city is nothing but huge, massive gaps. And I'm going to tell you, I say this as a friend, you're not rich enough to throw money away like that. None of us are. None of us are. If we go out and we come to grips with the fact that our city is nothing but gaps. Huge amounts of resources that we've done nothing to really capitalize on. The question that comes out of that is this: do we have the sophistication, the wherewithal? Do we have the capacity and the ability, the ingenuity to build something as complicated and refined as a Jimmy's Pizza? Because if we do, look at all the wealth we can build. Look at all the wealth we can build. We could spend the next 3 decades building nothing but buildings of that size and scale. And we would never have to build another pipe, never have to build another road, never have to build another sidewalk, and we would create enormous amounts of wealth. That's the first increment. Remember those series of pop-up shacks? That's what people did when they were starting anew. They would start with that. Now, I want to point out something about Jimmy's Pizza that we all intuitively understand, but we get kind of lazy about and forget sometimes. When you go and shop at one of these places, where does that profit go? It doesn't stay here. And understand, I've got no problem with any of these places. I get asked a lot, will you come and help us kill a Walmart? And I'm like, no, I will not. I don't have any problems with Walmart. If your luxury good is Walmart, then fine. Some people's luxury good is a stadium or a museum or a library. If your luxury good is Kohl's and Walmart and Home Depot, then go for it. But understand what you're doing. You're taking your wealth and you're shipping it out as fast as you can. That's what those places are designed to do. A typical Walmart, and we actually met with the head of the property tax division for Walmart. We asked him, how long does your building last? He was at an assessor's conference. And understand, assessor's conference is a group of people who are trying to decide how much taxes Walmart's going to pay based on how much their property's worth. So he's there explaining to them how junky and crappy all their buildings are. He says that we build these buildings, they're only designed to last 12 to 15 years. We fully amortize them out after 15 years, and then we move on to the next place. You are taxing us way too much because you're taxing us as if we're building nice places. We're actually building junky places. Imagine if you got married, and as you're walking down the aisle, you get up to the front, your minister or priest, whoever's doing the officiating, says, to you, till death do us part, and you're like, yes, I do. And then they look to your spouse and say, after 12 to 15 years, when you're fully amortized, you can move on to another place. And yes, I do. That's what you're doing. Because when they build it and you take over the pipe in the ground, you're promising that forever and ever and ever, you will maintain that pipe. And they're in for 12 to 15 years, and then they got a building that can't be reused. And by the way, in the interim, their goal is not to have a float in your 4th of July parade, volunteer in your PTA, support your community foundation, be a member of the chamber, do all those things. Their relationship with you is an extractive one. Like I said, I've got no problem with their business model. Their business model is completely adapted to what we as our communities have said we want. We subsidize them, we pay for them, we take over the liability for them. We do all of this because that's what our public good is. If you decide that's not your public good, that's a public policy, then you can do that. Where do the profits from Jimmy's Pizza go? They go to Jimmy, right? Who's Jimmy? Well, Jimmy goes to church with you. His kids go to school with your kids. Jimmy sponsors a softball team. He volunteers on the PTA. He's got a float in your 4th of July parade. He's a member of your chamber. Him and his family volunteer in different things. If Jimmy gets too big for his britches, what can we all do? Stop going to Jimmy's, right? In other words, Jimmy is connected to us, and we're connected to him. Now imagine if we spend the next 3 decades building more Jimmy's. What would that city look like? When we think of a place on the prairie, in the middle of nowhere, in a sense isolated from the world around us, this, of all places, and I get this in my hometown too, but I think even more here when I'm in Kansas, you have to have a sense of needing each other that is deep and intuitive here, more so than almost any other place in this country. And to me, if I'm stepping back and looking at this saying, what's my economic development strategy? One is making you bankrupt. As families, as businesses, as people, and as a community. Another one will build your wealth. And not just build your wealth in one dimension, but build your wealth in many dimensions. This is a little street in Memphis, Tennessee. It's a little street called Broad Avenue. Broad Avenue was a former streetcar stop. At one point, the city decided they didn't want the streetcar line anymore. They pulled it out. They ran a highway through the middle of the neighborhood. Without the foot traffic, without the community there in the neighborhood, these buildings the businesses just died. Some neighbors, fed up with the decline and the neglect, they took matters in their own hands. They went and worked with these business owners to get the stores swept out. They swept up the sidewalks. They painted their own bike lanes. They painted their own crosswalks. They put up a mural. For one weekend, they invited businesses from around the community to come in and just open up temporarily, just to show people what could be done. They had a couple art galleries. They had a bike shop. They had a clothier. They had a little ice cream stand. They didn't go get Department of Health inspections. They didn't get the building code official out there. They didn't go ask for permission. They just went out and did it. And they figured by the time anybody gets mad in official capacity and comes out to shut us down, we're going to be gone anyway, so let's just do it. This wasn't the greatest street in Memphis when they were done. It was a heck of a lot better than what they started with. I wasn't here for this project. I went to Memphis about 6 months after this, and they brought me out here to show me what they had done. 6 months later, every single storefront was now occupied. I talked to one of the landlords, told me he was able to charge double the amount of rent for the last place to go than what they were asking beforehand. The city recognized that something special happened here. They started to document what had gone on. They counted 18 new businesses, 32 new jobs, and in time, $12 million of property value appreciation. One of the most desperately poor cities, one of the most desperately poor neighborhoods in the country, seeing massive amounts of property value appreciation. Total public investment, zero. What we have started to recognize is that as a country, we have become so obsessed with the big project. We become so obsessed with that dollar out on the edge, or that big transformative thing we can do, that what we have done is we've overlooked the pennies, nickels, and dimes that are just laying there in our core neighborhoods waiting for us to pick them up. I spent a year out working in this one neighborhood in my community, the one with the Taco John's and the old and blighted block. A group and I worked out there. We had block parties. We had scavenger hunts. We did different things to get people out talking to each other. We went out and just tried to understand and observe people's struggles. We would, go walk with people as they went about their daily life. What's going on? Where are you going? Can I walk with you? Can I understand what you're going through? We saw the mom walking through the ditch, pushing a stroller, weeds up to her waist. What are you doing? Got to get to the grocery store, down the car. It's not safe to walk on the street, so I'm walking here. Saw the elderly woman walking down the middle of the street, the walker, climbing over mountains of snow. What are you doing? Have to get to the pharmacy. I can't drive. There's no sidewalk here, so I'm walking where I have to. Saw these kids on their way to school, walking through the alley. Just rains, they're going around these mud puddles. What are you kids doing? Why don't you walk? Well, our mom told us to not walk out on the street. The cars go too fast. We're supposed to walk here in the alley where it's safe. Think about that for a second. After a year of being out in this neighborhood, we came up with a little study we call Neighborhoods First. 8 little projects a city could do to directly deal with the struggles that people were having in this neighborhood. Put in a crosswalk here. Paint a bike lane here. Plant a row of trees over here. We went out and asked the question, where are people struggling? And what is the next smallest thing we can do right now to address that struggle? How do we get that incremental investment strategy going again? How do we get people confident in their neighborhood? Confident that their neighborhood is not just going to continue to decline forever. When I go around in your neighborhoods and I look at the fact that I can get a house for $35,000, and the neighborhoods look like I can get a house for $35,000, understand what's going on. I'm guessing, and you can nod if I'm right, that some of the conversation that you have is, well, those people don't care. They don't have pride of place. Maybe it's a bunch of slumlords. They're renters. They don't care about their place. They're not taking good care of their neighborhood. Now let me ask you this. If you had an investment that was worth $35,000 and you knew that you could put another $5,000 into it or $10,000 into it, or you could go spend hours and hours and hours doing stuff to it, and you knew that next year that $35,000 investment was going to be worth 34 or 33, what would you do? You're a smart person. Is that a good investment of your time and energy? If we look at those neighborhoods full of homes that are $35,000, $50,000, $70,000, oftentimes what comes into our brains is the brand new shiny neighborhood out on the edge of town. Oh, if we could just make these into $250,000 homes, $400,000 homes. Understand that if a $35,000 home becomes a $38,000 home, that's a nearly 10% increase in value. If that $40,000 home becomes a $44,000 home, and then a $48,000 home, and then a $52,000 home, you're growing the wealth of that neighborhood far more than you'll ever grow your 401k. What would it take to make investments like that go in a different direction? Not some big, huge museum, not some massive capital investment, not a redo of a street so the streetscape looks nice. It takes us going out and asking a different set of questions. Where are people struggling in this neighborhood? And what is the next smallest thing we can do right now to address that struggle? And if we can go out and do that, and ask those questions, and be serious about it, and do that work, and we can do that day after day, year after year, week after week, and neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood, not only can we get that incremental development pattern back, not only can we make the lowest risk, highest returning investments that it's possible to make in our places, but we cannot help but improve people's lives in the process. That's what a Strong Towns approach is. Thanks for having me tonight. I know we have opportunity. If you have to leave, I think we have 4 minutes till the end time. I'm happy to stay a little bit. I talk a little bit long. I know there's a couple of places up here to ask questions, and I think people would appreciate if you use the mic to ask questions. So if you want to come up here, I will gladly call on you. A couple of quick housekeeping things while people are coming up to ask a question. If you're interested, I always have to say this, my staff is mad if I don't. If you are, and I appreciate the mayor saying this too at the very beginning, if you're inspired by the work that we're doing and you think this is an important message, the number one thing that you can do for us as an organization is to share that with somebody else. We are desperately trying to get this message in front of as many people as we can. We think it's a powerful, transformative message. If you can, in your words, tell someone about it, that is going to help everybody. If you're inspired by us, that's the number one thing we ask you to do. If you are interested in getting a copy of our presentation or any of our information, you can go to this website right here. If you sign up on the email thing there, we'll email you the presentation. You can get it before you actually leave this room. If you want to follow us, strongtowns.org. Like I said, we're doing 2-3 articles a day. We're doing 3 podcasts a week. There's a lot of stuff there. Pick something that resonates with you and share it with somebody else. If you are really, really interested in helping us, We are a member-driven organization. We've got nearly 2,500 members around the country. We're trying to get to 3,000 by the end of the year. We're 501c3. Your membership helps us do more of these kind of things, and we would invite you to become a member. I know there's a number of people here who are, and I want to thank you for being members. If you are really, really, really interested in helping us, get involved in your community. We do not need big transformative things. We do not need things that mayors and senators are going to deliver to us. What we need is a bunch of people out there doing the little things that they can to make their neighborhood just a little bit better. If we're all doing those kind of things, this place will explode. No questions. It's funny. I was in North Dakota once. I gave a talk in a town in North Dakota, and we're good Midwesterners. I got to the end, and nobody had any questions, even though I knew they did. I was prepped with what the top questions would be. So when nobody asked the question, I said, okay, just to kind of break the ice, I will ask myself a question. And so I asked myself their top question, answered it, thought maybe that would prompt someone to come up. Nobody did. So I knew the second top question, so I asked that one. Nobody came up. I had three, and I said, if they're not going to come up, I'm not going to do it. So I said, well, good night, everybody, then. And then they all got up, and in a North Dakota way, got in a single file line, and all asked me that question individually. So they have to do it for everybody else. A few days later, I found myself in Little Havana, in Miami, giving the same exact presentation. I showed up half an hour before. The people who ran the building showed up 5 minutes after the thing was going to start. They weren't late, because that's just how they do things. We got started about an hour late. People were still coming in while we were getting going, so clearly that was culturally cool. 5 minutes into my presentation, I was interrupted so much, we just stopped and just talked for an hour and a half, and then I left. Two different cultures, two different places. So you seem to be more on the North Dakota side. It's perfectly okay. Tomorrow, is this thing open to the public or not? No? No? Could be. Tomorrow we're doing a little walking tour. Around noon, we're going to go through some neighborhoods and look at things and discuss them. If you're interested in that, if that's something that you think might be cool, come up here and talk to Carrie afterwards, and we'll see if we can squeeze you in. I know there's a limited number of spaces, but I think we've got a couple open. Do you have something? Go ahead, please. Yeah.
With regards to incentivizing businesses or developers, there's some people down in Fayette, Texas, that are doing some interesting things, and I know I picked up on something. I'd like others to hear about it. With regards to their target ratios that they use, could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the people in Fayette are doing some amazing stuff. When we research traditional development patterns, and we try to come up with, people always ask me, what's the proper density? And that's a very planner thing to ask. How many people do we cram into a spot to make it work? And it's the wrong question. Because in traditional development patterns, what you see is that there's all kinds of densities and they all work. The difference is that the level of public service provided. So I grew up on a farm way outside of town. How much infrastructure did we have? None. We had a 2-tire path road in front of our house that when it snowed, you might not get out for 2 or 3 days, right? Because we were obviously the last ones to get plowed. There was nothing there. That road didn't cost any, we didn't pay much in taxes, but that road didn't cost much to maintain. If you were in town, you had an intense amount of infrastructure, but you also didn't have 80 acres. You had a 25-foot lot, and you had houses next to each other, and they all chipped in, so you basically could pay for more infrastructure. What I'm talking about is a ratio. I'm a math person, so excuse me, but if you think about it, public investment, or private investment to public investment. If you're going to have a lot, think of the Empire State Building in Manhattan. If the pipe in front of the Empire State Building went bad, would the Empire State Building just say, well, I guess we got to abandon our building then because we can't afford to fix the pipe? No, the public investment there is so tiny compared to the private investment that maintaining it becomes easy. If we had a 2-mile road for, my old farm, and they went to my dad and said, it's going to be 1.8 million to fix this road, and he looks and says, well, my whole farm is worth 2 million. Do you see how that doesn't make sense? That ratio's off. So what they've done in Fate is they've said when a new development comes in, one of the things that we are going to require is that that ratio be correct. We are going to require a minimum of $20 of private investment for every $1 of public liability that they ask us to take on. So let's add up the cost of all the road and all the pipe and all the stuff that now is the public's responsibility, and let's make sure that we have enough tax base there to take care of that. 20 to 1. And what we said is that 20 to 1 is like the minimum you can have to be viable over the long term. In our studies of traditional development patterns and the communities that work, 20 to 1 is the minimum. Somewhere between 20 and 40 to 1 is kind of the range. I think if you were targeting one, I would target more like 30 to 1. But Fate is at 20, and that's radical, really, in the context we're in. Just to give you a sense of where we're at, I think $20 of private investment for every $1 public investment is viable. We've studied this community-wide in 4 different cities. In every single one, the ratio has been somewhere between 1 to 1 and 1 to 2. So in Lafayette, Louisiana, there's $32 billion of public investment and $16 billion of private investment. For every $1 private investment, it requires $2 of public investment. That is bankrupt. That's insolvent. That's insane. You can't squeeze $2 of blood out of that rock, right? It's just not going to work. So if you're looking at stuff out on the edge, I think it's like an easy first step to say, if we're going to approve a new development, greenfield development, undeveloped land, property coming to the city, we've got to make sure that there's ratios there. And 20 to 1 is what Fate done. And I'm saying, if you're not doing that, whatever you're getting is really harming you. Please, someone else add something?
So now we're going to do away with the codes and start developing from Kerry Park all the way north on Main Street. But I just want to make an observation. I saw your presentation over in Wichita.
Oh, wonderful.
Was that the art?
I did like 4 over there. I think one of them was at the library place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Well, no, I'm just to say that. What's your take? Because Wichita is about 5 or 6 times larger than we are, but I think we have a pretty good crowd for the size of this town. They came out because interested in this.
Oh, yeah.
What's your take on it? Because I think we got a good turnout. So,
Yeah.
should that mean a bit like we should be able to do something?
Absolutely.
Interest in what's going on.
Absolutely. I mean, I really appreciate all of you coming out. I mean, I understand when I started doing this years ago, I would drive 5 hours and 2 people would show up. That happened all the time. Is it over and over and over and over? It's now built up, and we've got great local sponsors and people getting people out. To me, I think this is indicative of the understanding that I think we all share. Well, what you've done today is you've said, here's the hurdle you have to pass. So if you have an idea for a new business, if you're Jimmy and you really like to sling pizzas, but you don't really know if this is the career for you, or if you can make a go of it, or if people are going to buy your pizzas, I tell you what, Jimmy, you go get a $250,000 loan, make all these improvements in this building, and then try it. What have we done? We've raised the bar of entry so high that the only people that can cross that bar is Pizza Hut and Domino's and these other places that have a different model. But we want Jimmy. What can we do for Jimmy? Here's what I would do. I would say, Jimmy, come in. Let's go out and look at this building together. We're going to send our city building code inspector. And they're going to walk through this building with you. And they're going to do 2 things. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to see, is there any imminent public health threat here? Is the roof about to cave in? Is there, bales of straw with gas dripping on them, with electricity arcing over top, right? Like, does this exist? And if any of that exists, the building code guy's going to say, Jimmy, before we can let anyone in here, like, these things have to be taken care of because they are imminent health threats. Then, Jimmy, here's a whole bunch of other things that need to happen. This bathroom needs to be redone so it's ADA compliant. This, you need an elevator over here, you need a fire system over here, you need, like, these things to make this work. What we're going to do, Jimmy, we're going to let you figure out if slinging pizzas is the job for you. If this is your career, you're an entrepreneur, we're going to let you figure out that messy part of, can you make this a viable business? Because we want you to have a viable business. We're going to let you figure that out. What we're going to do is we're going to put a provisional sticker on the door of your building. And it's going to just let people know, hey, if you're freaked out about this stuff, don't go in here, because Jimmy's figuring it out. Right? But if you're like one of those experimental people who's like, yeah, I'll give that a try, go try Jimmy's, he's figuring it out. And maybe we'll even put like a list of like, here's the things that need to be fixed in here at some point, along the way. We let Jimmy run for 6 months, he figures it out, he figures out, that I can really do this pizza thing, and there's a market here, and I figured out how to have game night or whatever, and bring people in on my off nights, and I figured out a contract with a local brewer, so I got good beer in here, and things are going well. So great, Jimmy, great. What we're going to do now is we're going to say, let's take every month part of your revenue, 2.5%, 3%, whatever it is, and it's going to go into an escrow fund every month. And we're going to have an accountant. We'll keep your books private, but the city's going to have to audit them or what have you. But you're going to send this money every month. It's going to build up this account, and when you get enough money to fix that bathroom, you're going to fix that ADA bathroom. And when you get enough money to put in that sprinkler system, you're going to put in that sprinkler system. And so what we're going to do, Jimmy, is we're going to lower the hurdle of entry so that you can get in and get going, and then we're going to use your success to fix the deficiencies of our community. Not the other way around. If we can start, if we can start thinking like that across every aspect of what we do, look at the progress we can make really, really quickly. So what I'm inviting you to do is take your mind and all the things where you say, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that, and say, okay, if we were going to do that, what would be the first step? And do that first step. Did you have something?
Yeah.
Please. We'll do a last question.
My name's Scott Lloyd, and you kind of make me feel guilty because I'm not to say thank you afterwards, but I just thought I'd come up here and say thank you.
Thank you.
But give you just a real quick observation. I'm a CPA by trade. Started coming down here 3 years ago from McPherson, and I live in Gallup, which is a town about 900. But I grew up in a town called Sedan, Kansas, in Chautauqua County. It's the poorest county in the state of Kansas. My dad was a banker there for 56 years. And I wish I'd have heard your talk 35 years ago, because my full-time job is to help cities, counties, and schools across the state of Kansas do their budget, do their audit, do those types of things. Some things you talked about, I saw my dad do for 56 years in Sedan, because he didn't have the money to do it.
Right.
I moved to McPherson, and the assessed value was just like off the charts, so they think they can do everything, with that. So you have those two ranges, and then you come to Hutch, and I couldn't agree with you more about the gaps, because it is concerning when you got all these different gaps. But we moved in 200 North Main. It's an old bank building, 1886, where I think it was. And it's just exciting to see the downtown changing.
Yes.
I guess the question I have, and I'm going to go out and do research. I've never seen your stuff before, so I'll go out to your website and I'll dive in.
Wonderful.
But the thing you see, I think, from a budget of a city is they're always hoping that the assessed value goes up the next year so that they can increase the mill levy or not have to increase the mill levy in order to cover the things they want to do in that city.
Right.
And there's just a mindset like sales tax. And that, to tell you how bad this is, my thought process when Target went out here, I thought, oh goodness, there goes all the sales tax. How in the world is a city going to be able to survive? But I really appreciate what you're saying here, and I just want to say thank you. And the way I want to say thank you, I have a book that I've been giving out when I came down here. It's called The Flower Man. And it's about this one person that comes to the city, and it literally goes right along with what your talk is. So I don't know where you're at after this.
I'm a crazy reader, so I would.
Well, there's no words, so you're good.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
And there's a great message in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
You got me all choked up. I know there's a couple more folks that had questions here.
I'm happy to stay longer. I just didn't want to make it awkward for everybody.
Well, I would say, there's folks that need to
Okay.
leave, given the time of the evening. And please feel free.
Where are you going next? What's the name of the place?
Carl's.
Carl's. Carl's. Like you're cute. Please.
You haven't addressed the Amazon effect.
Yeah.
And we have, as you said, hundreds of thousands of square feet of empty retail
Right.
when you include the mall and so forth.
Right.
And while it might not affect Jimmy's Pizza,
Right.
it affects almost everything else. Can you briefly address the Amazon effect and how we get around that?
Thank you for the question. It's perfect. We don't, internally in our organization, we don't have an agreement on Amazon. But I'm the president, so I'll give you my take. My take has always been like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And for many reasons, I think that Amazon can, in the very short term, be a very positive force for us. A lot of what needs to happen in our community, and I don't want to make this about rich people, but let me just from a coarseness standpoint, I apologize for the coarseness of this, but let me make this statement. We need to have the wealthy people in our community want to live in the core of our community. We want to have them we want them to want to live in our neighborhoods. And let me say this in a different way. We want our neighborhoods to be so wonderful that everybody of all incomes wants to live there. Okay? It's not like I have to live there because it's all I can afford. We want everybody to say, in an optimum way, that's where I want to live. Part of making that happen is not forcing those people to own cars if they don't want to, or to drive if they don't want to. I live in a core neighborhood. I drive to the airport and back. During the summer, when I don't have to bring my kids to school or go pick them up and bring them to dance and do all the dad stuff, or if my kids are like getting, I never drive. I never drive. And the way I never drive is we have this service called Instacart. It sounds like a diva thing, but it's actually not very expensive, especially compared to gas and time and all that. They bring my groceries right to home. They drop them off at the front door. I got this thing called Amazon. I get all my stuff that I used to run out to Target to get. I have not been to Target for a year, 2 years. Never go. Never go to the grocery store. Never go to Target. I just never go. If you want to improve the quality of life for people living in a neighborhood, you make it so they never have to leave it. You're not going to open up a corner place that's going to have toothpaste and iPads and all that stuff. You're never going to, next year, right? You're never going to, in 2 years from now, open up maybe you'll have a corner grocery that'll have some of that, but they're not going to have the selection that, I can't get this special kind of sauce I like they have in the grocery store. So what I look at, like Amazon and some of these other kind of warehousing services, as like transitionary services to a more local way of living. Now, understand, we go out to eat at the local restaurant. I don't go out to the Applebee's or the Olive Garden on the Edge. I go to like the local place that's got Italian and the local Mexican place. That's where we go. Those are my two favorite restaurants. I go to the local hardware store because there's one there. So like yesterday I needed a part for my faucet was leaking. I did not go out to Home Depot. I went to the local place because it was really good. It was there. I didn't want to get in my car. It was 6 blocks away. It was a nice little walk. I went down there. I also happened to buy a hot chocolate at the little place when I went. So what you're doing is you're creating an ecosystem where people essentially getting in your car becomes a lifestyle choice, not a necessity of life. And to make that transition, I think Amazon is like a critical part of it. I think they are, in the worst case, a necessary evil to making that transition. Now, understand, as we create this ecosystem of Jimmy's and other kind of things doing different things, they become replacements for the stuff you get from Amazon, right? Like, I don't order things from Amazon that I can get right here. I order things from Amazon that I can't get in my hometown. And the more and more people that are there, the more that stuff is going to be available that I can get. Let me just say one thing from a macroeconomic sense about Amazon. I'm very interested in the stock market and investing. I did a podcast about my investment portfolio earlier this year, if you're interested. Basically, I own no stocks. I think the stock market is crazy insane right now. But when you look at Amazon in particular, their price to earnings ratio is like 120. It's just insane. I don't know how high it is. It's ludicrously high. Part of the assumption behind that is that Amazon will become a monopoly. The numbers only work that way. It's like, no one would pay that price for that stock if they weren't anticipating the same rate of growth. And the same rate of growth only happens if all these other people go away, and then Amazon becomes a monopoly. And if Amazon becomes a monopoly, they will get broken up and changed. It's becoming like an antitrust kind of issue. And I don't think, let me put it this way. I think 10 years from now, Amazon will either be a public service, which, let me give you quite frankly, it is today. Investors subsidize every single package that you get. Amazon's not making any profit on their retail. So basically, the people who are buying Amazon stock are subsidizing your delivery. It's really a ridiculous system. Amazon's either going to become basically like a utility. I don't think that's the most likely option. Or they're going to be broken up as a monopoly and regulated in some way. I think that's probably the more likely option, even though I not necessarily think that's a great option. I think that that's probably the most likely outcome. So the moral of the story, use Amazon as a transition to help you create neighborhoods where people don't have to get in their car. Because if you are a poor family, and we can go from having 2 cars to 1 car, you just save them somewhere between $7,000 and $9,000 a year. That's a huge sum of money. If you can create neighborhoods where people can have the option to have only 1 car, and then ultimately have the option to have no car, you have liberated the biggest expense, all that money flowing out of your community that you can, and you can redirect that money into your neighborhoods. And actually, Amazon is part of that transition. There's some collateral damage from it, and I'm not trying to diminish that. Your local bookstore was probably not a fan of Amazon, and I don't blame them. I try to shop at my local bookstore whenever I can. But I think the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the enemy of getting people to live in a core neighborhood is that if I got to drive 15 minutes out to just do routine shopping like everybody else, the advantage of that place diminishes a lot. We have to make the place really, really special for people.